The afternoon sun burned lazily over the small town's cracked roads. But the sound that suddenly cut through the thick summer air wasn't the rumble of engines, it was a scream. Not a loud, attention-hungry scream, but a small, desperate, broken cry. A little girl, no older than 7, sprinted barefoot down the roadside. Her pigtails bounced as dust clung to her tear-streaked face. She clutched a torn, faded pink teddy bear. But her other hand waved wildly in the air. "Help! Please help!" she sobbed. That was when a group of bikers rolled up the highway. Their leather vests dark against the bright day. Their engines roaring like thunder. Most people feared them, the town whispered stories about the bikers, painting them as dangerous men who didn't care about anyone but themselves. But what those whispers didn't know was that this group, the Iron Hawks, had their own code: protect the weak, defend the helpless, never turn your back on a cry for help. Their leader, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek, named Jax, saw the girl stumble onto the road. Without hesitation, he hit the brakes, the tires screeching against the rough asphalt. One by one, the rest of the bikers lined up behind him, the rumble of engines slowly dying out. "What's wrong, kid?" Jax crouched down, his gravelly voice softening as he looked at her trembling body. She could barely catch her breath. "They're beating my mama," she cried out, clutching his vest. The entire group froze. A sharp silence fell between the bikers. And their faces hardened, not with cruelty, but with a cold, protective fire. Jax exchanged a look with his second-in-command, a woman named Raven, who nodded without a single word. The next second, the engines roared back to life. Not with the aimless thunder of men riding for thrill, but with purpose. The little girl climbed onto the back of Jax's massive bike, her tiny arms wrapping around his waist. As the wind rushed against her tear-stained cheeks, the bikers didn't ask for directions. She pointed with a shaking finger toward a small, run-down trailer at the edge of the town. Even before they got close, they could hear it. The yelling. The crashing of something being thrown. A woman's muffled cry. Rage simmered inside Jax like oil on fire. They didn't slow down. When they reached the trailer, 3 men were outside, laughing crudely, holding beer bottles. The door was half open, and inside, a woman lay on the floor, bruised and bleeding, trying to shield herself from another blow. The moment the bikers arrived, everything stopped. The men outside froze, unsure whether to run or fight. They'd heard of the Iron Hawks. Everybody in town had. And they knew these weren't men who walked away from injustice. "You picked the wrong house," Jax growled as he dismounted his bike. The men tried to act tough, sneering. "This ain't your business, biker boy." But the way the Iron Hawks spread out, silent, united, powerful, made their bravado shrink like a shadow in the sun. One of the abusers raised a bat. But before he could swing it, Raven moved faster than a strike of lightning, kicking it out of his hand and pinning him to the ground with brutal precision. Another tried to run, but a biker named Bear grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the fence. Not enough to kill, but enough to make sure he'd never forget this moment. Jax walked into the trailer. He saw the woman on the floor, her lip bleeding, her arms covered in bruises. The little girl ran past him, screaming, "Mama!" and dropped to her knees, hugging her mother tightly. The woman's weak smile through her tears was like a light flickering in the dark. Jax's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. He just turned around and stared at the last man standing, the one who had raised his hand against her. "You hit her?" he asked quietly, too quietly. The man stammered something that sounded like an excuse. But Jax didn't need to hear it. He didn't need an explanation. He needed justice. And justice, for him, was swift. Jax grabbed the man by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. Not in fury, but with a controlled, cold precision that made the man shake like a leaf in a storm. "You ever touch her again?" Jax whispered, his voice low enough to make the air itself grow heavy. "I'll make sure you Can't lift your hand again for the rest of your life. The man's face drained of color. The other bikers stood like a wall of iron behind Jax. Their presence more terrifying than any weapon. But Jax wasn't here to destroy. He was here to protect. Pack your things, Raven said gently to the woman. You're coming with us. The woman blinked through her tears. I can't, he'll find us. Raven knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her bruised face. No. He won't. Not with us. The bikers escorted the woman and her daughter out of the house, forming a shield around them. As they walked away, the men didn't dare move. The roar of engines filled the air once more as the Iron Hawks rode away with their new passengers. But this time, the roar didn't sound dangerous. It sounded like victory. It sounded like safety. At the club's safe house, an old barn converted into a biker haven, the woman was given food, water, and a warm place to rest. The little girl sat on Jax's lap, her tiny hands clutching a hot cup of cocoa as she looked around at these men and women who had come to their rescue. She had been terrified of them when they first arrived, their leather jackets and tattoos making them look like monsters in a story. But now, she saw them differently. She saw the kindness in Raven's eyes, the gentleness in Bear's rough hands as he fixed her teddy bear with a needle and thread. Jax sat quietly, his arm resting on the table. But his eyes softened every time the little girl glanced at him. Why did you help us? She asked in a small, shaky voice. Jax looked at her, then at her mother who sat wrapped in a blanket, finally breathing without fear. Because no one should ever be alone when they're scared, he said simply. The bikers didn't want thanks. They didn't want praise. They wanted justice. That night, while the little girl slept peacefully for the first time in a long time, the Iron Hawks made a few calls. By the next morning, those men who had terrorized her mother were in handcuffs. Not because the bikers broke the law, but because they made sure the law couldn't ignore what happened. The entire town buzzed with the story. People who once crossed the street when they saw the bikers now saw them differently. They weren't outlaws. They were protectors. Silent guardians with steel hearts. A week later, the woman and her daughter stood in front of the club, their eyes filled with tears of gratitude. We'll be okay now, she whispered. Jax nodded, handing the little girl a tiny leather jacket with the Iron Hawks emblem stitched on the back. Your family now, he said. She threw her arms around him, hugging him tight. The once feared bikers now had a new purpose, not just to ride the open roads, but to protect those who had no one else to fight for them. And as they roared out onto the highway again, the sun rising behind them, the little girl waved with a smile on her face, a smile that hadn't been there in a long time. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of a new story. For them all, the sun rose softly over the highway as the bikers watched the little girl smile for the first time in days. Her mother stood stronger now, safe and free. Jax handed the girl a tiny leather jacket, making her part of their family. The Iron Hawks roared away, not as outlaws but as protectors. Hope had returned, and their bond was unbreakable. Heroes don't always wear capes, sometimes they ride. #subscribe for more.